Welcome to Own Your Own Stuff, the way back to connecting with partners, coworkers, family, and community. Featuring your host, Jane Donovan.
Today, I want to talk about relationships and men. How are we different to men? How can we understand each other better? How can we support each other? And particularly, how can we encourage men to move towards vulnerability and healing of their past? My guest today is Diane McCann, who has been working in the field of human development for more than 50 years. Throughout this time, she's helped people to bring awareness and information into their minds and hearts about their own potential as human beings. And she happens to be one of my favorite people on the planet. Diane's business, Beyond the Ordinary, regularly hosts workshops in the Goddess Within, Man's Inner Journey, and Tantra for couples. I also love that Diane has seen many waves of trends and philosophies come and go, and having been committed to this field for such a long time, has simple logic and wisdom to share in creating and living a life you enjoy. I start by asking Diane, what do you feel is one of the hardest things men have to deal with emotionally?
I think it's basically that last word, their emotions, because men are not trained to be able to express their feelings. When they're little, they're told, don't cry, don't be a baby, you're a man, grow up, all of those things, which men have been raised with. I mean, you know, the new generation with the people who've got little kids right now, hopefully the majority of them are doing it differently. But for anyone probably over the age of 30, 35, 40, it's a tough call because they were not allowed to feel. And if you can't feel, then you can't access your vulnerability and you can't access your heart. And that's where everything lies.
How important do you think it is for men to learn to be vulnerable in their relationships?
I think it is the most important thing, full stop, the end. Because if a man can't be vulnerable and the challenge that men have is that they actually don't always know what they actually feel because they've never been taught to actually go there and express it. So the majority of men will say, I'm fine. Let's use an example of the difference between men and women and health. A woman will say, oh, you know, I've got this pain in my breast, and she will do a breast exam, and if she finds something, she will immediately go to a doctor. A man will have problems, will just say urinating, and he'll think to himself, maybe a visit to the doctor. No, I'm not going to do that. And so many men do not actually take care of their health. They know something's going on, but they actually don't do anything about it because they don't want to think that there's anything wrong with them. It's very interesting. I've spoken to a lot of health practitioners and doctors about this, and they always say, why is it that men never come to see a doctor until it's too late, or a naturopath or whatever? So for men, their fear lies around expressing themselves, lies around their vulnerability. And of course, men do it so differently to women. And men are very alone. Women have always had each other. And we know that, you know, a woman can ring her girlfriend up and say, and she'll feel better. And her partner will be sitting there and he'll say, what'd you talk about? And she'll say nothing. But a man will ring a man up, maybe, or he'll get a phone call and it will be, yes, no, okay, see you then. That's it. They don't have the ability to be able to communicate. In fact, many, many, many years ago, I had a man who had had a sex change to become a woman come to my female program. And I asked him, why are you here? And she said, she was wonderful. She said, Because as a man, I have no idea how to do chit chat, and women seem to be exceptionally good at it. And I want to learn how they do that. And that floored me. I mean, this is 20 years ago plus. I think men have it way tougher than women do. I think that women do not see that, because we have our own agendas when it comes to men. And the truth is, both men and women put each other into boxes, and that's generally where they stay. It's very sad, I mean, some of the simple things. Women want to talk about something because it makes them feel better. But men don't want to talk about it because it actually doesn't make them feel better. In fact, it actually makes them feel worse, because the loneliness of disconnection is probably at the root of every argument and every silence. And that fuels resentment and it fuels frustration. And beneath that, for the woman, is that disconnection makes her feel anxious. And on a deeper level, it makes her feel isolated and it makes her feel afraid. But the men don't want to talk about it because of her dissatisfaction makes him feel like a failure. Absolutely so interesting. Baby boys don't have the ability to connect deeply to their mother's eyes when they're tiny babies and they're being breastfed or fed the way that a baby girl does. A baby girl can hold your eye contact for much, much, much longer. And this is scientifically proven. Baby girls can hold eye contact because it makes them feel safe. They frighten more easily than boys, and they feel fear at loud noises more than boys. But baby boys can't hold that eye contact for the first 6 to 9 months as easily as girls. Baby boys startle 5 times more than baby girls do. And they are provoked by lower stimuli, which heightens their sensitivity to abrupt stimulation and to hair trigger responses. So when overstimulated, the brain releases a cortisol dump, which is like having a hangover for a baby. It's just so fascinating because we're so different, and yet we're so similar. We are, and we each have the divine masculine and the divine feminine within us. We just have to find a way to bring that together. If you look at girls and boys, both sexes experience shame, and shame is to cover or to conceal. And so let's go back to the babies and the eye contact. If you break eye contact with a baby, they can experience shame, red face, their faces get red. There's kind of a contorted facial expression often on babies. But if a male experiences this over and over and over again, it is basically labelled as isolation, because what they do is they then go inside. And it's very hard to bring someone out once they've gone in.
When I had my singles social club, that was for those in their 40s, 50s and beyond, it may be surprising to know that 75% of people shared with me that they felt lonely. And most of these people were perceived from the outside looking in that they had friends and family, careers, hobbies, interests, and yet they still felt lonely. So I asked Diane her thoughts on loneliness.
It's very painful because when you're a lonely child, you grow up to be a lonely adult, and you can't, if you don't learn the skills of reaching out, it's impossible unless you have a very good person who can just slowly draw you out. But loneliness is a very sad thing. And you're right, most of the world is lonely. Whereas we've already said women build alliances with other women by exposing their vulnerability. Like if I'm sad, I could ring you up and I could cry on the phone and I would feel your compassion coming back at me. And you would say some wonderful words and I would feel better. So when women sense a friend is in emotional need, they become more interested and emotionally invested in each other. Whereas men have the exact opposite reaction because they just don't know what to do. Because what is men's thing, you know? I mean, John Gray said it back in the 60s or whenever it was, you know, men want to fix it. And as we know, we can't be fixed. We're the only ones that can do that. Nobody can do it for us, which is why, you know, relationships break down. When they break down, women then have to go inside and find their own strength. Because we look to men to we say we don't want anyone to fix us, but we actually need a man who can actually listen. And when we have something to say, we have to tell them. We just have to. But a man has to face his vulnerability, and thus he feels inadequate because he can't fix it, because he knows she doesn't want to be fixed. He's tried that 10 times and it didn't work, and she's just got angry. So where does a man go? He just goes internal, and he goes to that lonely place inside himself where he feels, oh my God, I'm not doing this right. I'm wrecking my relationship. You know, he can respond in a million ways. He might respond with impatience. Oh, you've said this before. Why don't you figure it out? Or he might distract, say, oh, let's just go to the movies. But I don't want to go to the movies. I want to talk about what it is that's going on with me. He might become defensive because he feels inadequate. He might get resentful. He might criticize, you know, or he might give advice. But his shame is too great to allow him to actually understand her fear, because somewhere he thinks it's his fault. And then her fear keeps her from seeing his shame, and the resulting thing is disappointment and complete heartache for both people. And so they go off to their own separate spaces. But, you know, in the end, it's riskier for women not to invest in love, compassion, and nurturance, because they will be more vulnerable to the fear of harm, isolation, deprivation if they don't. And it's riskier for men to invest too much in love, compassion, and nurturing, because that will make him more vulnerable to feeling like failures as lovers or protectors or a parent. But unless a man is emotionally connected in a way that promotes safety, this is what he'll hear when she talks to him. Blah, 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 blah. He'll hear failure, blah, 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 blah. I'm not good enough, blah, 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 blah. I can't meet her needs, blah, blah, blah. And unless a woman is emotionally connected to her partner, this is what she will hear when he criticizes her, blah, blah, blah. She'll hear, I don't love you, blah, blah, blah. I'm not there for you. And when he ignores her or stonewalls, she hears the true sound of silence. And for her, that says, I don't love you. And girls are born with more sensitivity to fear and isolation, and boys are born with more sensitivity to arousal and shame. And the differences are slight when the parents are in tune, but if there's any disharmony, and let's face it, you know, John Bradshaw said there's no such thing as a functional family. So you know, very few people are born into a functional family. So it's all fascinating.
For years, I've been on a mission to find ways to support men in their inner journey. And so I had to grab this chance to ask Diane what she thought may be some ways, perhaps even baby steps, that men can take to try to find a way to start to nurture themselves, to grow, and to find a safe way to connection.
Well, my belief, which is very much like yours, is that you've just got to do the work. You know, you can't find any of that by staying home and reading a book. Books can help. Books like Manhood, you know, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant book written by Meadow. But in the end, they actually have to go put themselves into a place where they can actually begin to feel. Can I tell you a quick story? At one of our programs, we had this beautiful man. He was super smart. And he actually said that when he was a child, his father would beat him if he got anything less than 99.9% on any exam. So he was totally focused on his mind. And he became unbelievably successful. He's super smart. But when I asked him, why are you here? He said, because I need to learn empathy. And, he sat there with his arms folded through most of it because, it just wasn't touching him. And then partway through the day, a young man spoke up, and he was half this guy's age. And it turns out the question was, which part of the family do you fit in? Because, of course, that has a huge impact on whether you're the firstborn or the secondborn. And this boy said he was one of 12 children, and he was young. And I said, 12 children? I haven't heard of that for like 100 years, people having 12 kids. And he said, well, I was twin, and I was found in a disgusting hovel by Social Security with my twin and 3 other tiny children, 6 down. He said I had rat bites all over me, and my mother was a prostitute, and I was taken away by Social Security. We were separated, my twin and I was put in a home, and the couple who fostered me sent me to a Catholic school, and I was raped by the priest. And my parents refused to accept that that was what was happening. He said, and it's just come out like 20 years later that this guy, the priest, was being taken to court. And he said, I'm here this weekend because in 2 days I have to fly to another state and be a witness. And this guy was sobbing by then. And the guy who wanted empathy came over to him with all the other men just gathered around this one man and just held him. And the man who needed empathy, he broke down and he said, I'm done. This is amazing. This is what I came for. I don't need anything else. So, for a man, that's the value of men allowing themselves to be vulnerable. Because when you see vulnerability in the eyes or in the face or in the body language of someone who is in pain and is willing to show it, it kind of cracks open something in you. And I've seen it over the last 26 years of running men's stuff. And it's so beautiful because, they walk in and they don't even know that they're in a prison of their own making. And once that prison door opens and the bars disappear, then they start to feel. And then their hearts open up. And once their hearts open up, then they're willing to do more. So I recommend that everyone, men, women, kids, everyone does the work. There's fantastic programs around the world for kids, for teenagers, for women, for men, for couples. And I think it's really, really important because we have men, and I don't go to, obviously, the men's groups because I'm not allowed, but I know that many men, just like many women, will come and they will say nothing, 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 maybe for several weeks. And then all of a sudden, the floodgates open and they feel safe enough because the other men are sharing. And the same thing can happen with women. I've seen it happen with women, but men seem more prone to that. The other side of that coin is that men and women both get stuck in their story. Some men go to programs or to men's groups and it's the same story. And that's why you need a strong leader who can actually guide them out of their story. Because if you're going to run a story, you can run it from the time you're 20 until you die. And the story isn't going to change because you've made it up. I mean, some of it may have been real, but I bet you any money if you went back to the reality, you'd find that you've added slight things to it. It's grown in its magnificence of being poor me, or this woman did this to me, or this woman did that to me. I have a very dear friend who is a very successful speaker on the planetary circuit. And he says, one day I'd been married 3 times. And he said, I was about to get married for the 4th time. He said, and I can remember looking in the mirror going, wow, that first woman, Jane, she was just amazing, but there was something wrong. And then the second woman, that woman, Diane, yeah, she was okay too, as he's looking in the mirror. But, I wonder why it didn't work, because we got on really well in the first place. And then the third one might be, and then I married that woman, Lane, and same thing as he's looking in the mirror, like, what's the one thing they all have in common? He looks into his eyes and goes, oh my God, it's me. Perhaps it's me that needs to change. Because whatever you have not resolved from your childhood, especially to do with your parents, will come up. It cannot avoid it. It will come up in your relationships. You see people like, let's pick Rod Stewart. How many times has he been married? And every one of his women had a similar body shape and a similar height and similar blonde hair and beautiful, because there is something from his past that draws him to that type of woman in order to heal his relationship with his mother and father. And so in the end, that's what it's about. That's one of the things that we're here for, is to heal the stuff from our past so that we can actually be in the present, so we can move into a more beautiful future.
Before we move on to more tools for men to start with, I want to explain, or rather expand a bit, about the fascinating concept of birth order that Diane mentioned with the man who was born into a family of 12 children. The theory is that the firstborn child plays out the emotional story of the father. The secondborn does so with the mother. The thirdborn plays out the story of the parents' relationship. And the fourthborn child plays out the story of the whole family. The fifthborn reverts back to dad, however, often with a lack of love due to the scale of the family, and so on it repeats. I've tested this theory with thousands of clients over the years, and it's fascinating to look at for greater self-awareness. So now let's get back to Diane and what are some easy to start tools for men to start the work.
For tools, there's this woman called Alison Armstrong, who you may or may not know, but I adore her work. Is just astonishing. And her books are absolutely wonderful. For me, it was huge when I first came across her, because she speaks about men in a very different way. She talks about how when they're little, they are like the page, they're kind of looking at the older boys in the school and seeing what they're doing, and they actually want to copy it. But of course, they're clumsy, so they pick up a pretend sword and they play sword fighting, whatever. And then as they grow up, they become knights, and what they think about is, riding off to war, saving the damsel in distress on the top of the tower, basically drugs, sex and rock and roll. And, riding on the big white horse, galloping off. And of course, men go through that period once they get to whatever age, you can say 18 to say 25, something like that. But that's where they are. And then they become the prince. Now, there's 3 different types of princes, but basically the prince is that they're looking at their father to see, what do I need to do to be better than he is? Because he's the king, right? And so when a prince, just say that you've grown up and you're looking and you go, right, now I've got to get a good job and I've got to earn lots of money and I've got to support this woman and my family, la, la, la. But of course, many of them become workaholics. So they're never available for their princess or their queen or whatever you want to call it, the woman. And so then the woman gets really frustrated because, of course, he's never there. He's always either working or thinking about work or whatever. So then for the prince, that's often when marriages break down. And usually around the age of late 50s, early 60s, the man becomes a king. Now, the saying is that when a man is a prince, you can pour him, think of batter, cake batter or pancake batter, you can pour him into any shaped tin and he will mould to that tin, right? So you can put him in a heart-shaped tin or a round tin or a square tin. Once he becomes a king, you cannot pour him into any mold because he is himself. And it's a very powerful thing to think about because, women often say, I want to change him. And I often say, how old is he? And they'll say whatever 56. I'll say, forget it. We actually can't change anyone. They have to want to change themselves. Her books, Alison Armstrong, she has brilliant, brilliant books because they actually explain how we do what we do. And it comes way back to the days when a man, for instance, would have to go kill a bison. And the whole group would go out. They would be 100% focused on that food that was there. Whereas a woman, when she goes out gathering food, she's got her baby in a basket. So she puts the basket down so she can go and pick the berries. But her view of the world is much bigger because she has to keep her ears out in case anyone comes. They might come and, an animal might come and grab the baby. So she's far more aware of the environment than a man is because he's just like, but of course, what happens in relationships then is that couples get together and men find out what works and they do it for the next 30 years and the woman is bored witless with it because it might have worked when you were 18 and you were just in the height of passion, but then it just dissolves. So it's like for women to realize that men are not mind readers and women have a huge part to play in the whole relationship thing because they actually don't speak up. They don't know what they want. It probably in any way, but no more so than sexually. They have no clue what they want. And so for the majority of women, if a man says, what would you like me to do to you today? They go, I don't know. What would you like to do? Anything, because we don't know, because women don't understand their own bodies and men are totally willing to, walk over cut glass to bring pleasure to a woman, but pretty much neither of us are completely in our divinity around anything, really, around our sexuality, around our power, around our capabilities. Having run a women's program for 34 years, people say to me sometimes, so, you must have seen huge changes. And the truth is, Jane, I haven't. Women still put themselves down, don't love themselves enough, don't think that they're capable enough, or else they go the other way where the ego is just so huge and they've become more masculine and more direct and stronger, but there's no vulnerability there. We've got a lot of work to do on ourselves and on the planet. The way I see it is we know what's going on the planet right now, and it's time to end the war and open to the grace of a higher relationship with ourselves, with our beloved, and with every single person in our world. The only way we can do that is by peeling off the layers of the onion and being true to our own hearts. And it is worth every ounce of the work that you do on yourself. It brings joy and it brings peace. And in the end, isn't that what we all want? It's on us, each and every one of us, to just go into our hearts, to know that our hearts are a safe place to be, and to allow everything that we are to shine forth out of our hearts and touch every human being that we come into contact with, because that's what everyone needs right now. Enough of the fear, enough of the scare. Let's just love people for who they are, because every being on this planet is magnificent. It's just that we've forgotten. So let's remind everyone, shall we? Starting with us. I want to tell you, Jane Donovan, you are magnificent and I love you.
Oh my goodness, you are magnificent and I love you. We do indeed have a lot of work to do, and while we are all doing our best to create new ways of being, we may not have all the answers yet. However, we have a great start by doing all we can to own our own stuff, to do the work, to commit to being connected, and to be coming from our hearts, raising our love vibration. Often people are scared to do the work because they believe they are taking themselves to a place of pain or to an area where they won't be high functioning. Yet my experience is the more work I do, the better I feel. And if you'd like to reach out to Diane, head to her website, beyondtheordinary.net.au. I hope you have enjoyed today's episode, and thank you for listening.
You have been listening to Own Your Own Stuff with host Jane Donovan. To connect with Jane, head to janedonovan.com.au.